Hey, welcome back to Bandwagon fans. This is Jeff, and tonight I'm going to be talking about Lighthouse. This is a movie. Let's see, it's written and directed by Robert Eggers, also written by his brother Max, starring Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson. And this is a movie about two lighthouse caretakers who are isolated in the, according to the director, the furthest lighthouse in the remotest part of the earth. Although it's really kind of like late 19th century um, New England. Um, but anyways, isolated on this island with this lighthouse as these two men go slowly insane together. Maybe, or maybe one of them did, maybe both of them did. And that's kind of the point of this movie is. So it's a movie about it's hard to categorize. Maybe a very introspectively psychological thriller. Um, and just a quick knee jerk reaction. This movie absolutely bored me to tears. Um, Several times throughout the movie, I was yawning, kind of getting uncomfortable, um, and it, but it's also at the same time one of those a movie where I think a second viewing, I would probably appreciate it a lot more. So some of the things that was really good about this movie. First of all, the cinematography was phenomenal. This is shot black and white. It looks like it was shot on film stock, although it could be digital. And it was shot in a I forget exactly what the aspect ratio was, but it was almost a 1-to-1 aspect ratio, which means even though you're seeing it on a widescreen theater, the actual movie is basically a box. It's a little bit wider than a box, but it's basically a box, and that really helped. It kind of does two things. It kind of gives the audience a claustrophobic feeling because everything is so tight. It also, by cutting out all this extraneous stuff on the sides, it kind of accentuates the lighthouse. And there are actually times watching the movie where it kind of an optical illusion. It felt like the screen itself was angled like a lighthouse, like it was wider at the bottom and narrower at the top. Although that could just be me, my mind playing tricks on me. The acting, this is although there's a couple scenes with a third actor about Valeria Karaman. This movie was pretty much like 99.5% Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson, and they they knocked it out of the park. Willem Dafoe, in particular, was phenomenal. The entire movie was shot with natural light. I don't think there was. I think a couple other people mentioned this, but no, I don't think there was any external light sources in the movie. So if it was at night, the only lighting was the candle or the lantern between them. If they were inside during the day, all the light what was coming through the windows. So it created these really deep shadows. So as a photographer and as a photographer who does enjoy doing black and white photography, it was really amazing. It was really great just watching this movie, and just appreciating the shots throughout the film. However, the other thing that worked besides the cinematography, besides the acting, um, this movie was effective in creating kind of putting us the audience in kind of in the perspective of the people on this island and not knowing what was real, losing track of what was real and what was not. That was a very deliberate choice by Robert Eggers, a series of deliberate choices by him. I was reading an interview from him earlier today, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm not going to answer your question because it was the things in the movie are deliberately vague. You're not so as the story progresses, we're not sure one of these two characters might be going insane. They might both be going insane. Um, as they tell stories about their past, they might be lying, they might not be lying, and we as the audience really never know what's going on. And as the movie ends, we don't know what's going on. We don't know what actually happened, other than most. It's safe to assume that both men. Oh, okay. So when I talk about movies on this channel, it's going to be all spoilers. If you don't want to see spoilers, you should probably just go see the movie now, come back because I'm going to be talking about what happens in the movie, and I have to talk about spoilers. This isn't really a traditional review. Um, so as by the end of the movie, both of these men have died. That's pretty much the only thing we know. What we don't know is was one hallucinating? Were they both hallucinating? Was one of the other hallucinating? Um, was it actually real? Some of the things that we see a mermaid, we see giant octopus or possibly krakens. Were these things actually real, or were they hallucinations? It is completely left open, and it's in that regards, it's very reminiscent of the monkey's paw, where you could find enough material to argue that everything really happened or none of it actually happened. It was all hallucinations from the characters. So all that, so all of that, I really did appreciate. I think the reason why this movie didn't work for me ultimately, and I've seen this in several films in the last few years. So going back to Arrival, Annihilation, David Eggers' previous film, The Witch, um, and then Midsommar and Hereditary, and now Lighthouse. There's these movies that really rely on mood and atmosphere, and I think I would like that, but in actual practice, I kind of don't. But I think more so in this movie, that and also in all these movies, they kind of rely on the audience having a knowledge about the subject that, quite frankly, the average person just is not going to have. So, for example, in The Witch, actually, I'll come back to The Witch. In Hereditary, a lot of the imagery, a lot of the themes that were built up in Hereditary were really dependent on a very specific demon. Well, if you're a demonologist, if you're into that kind of thing and you read about demons, you would have picked up on this demon from early on, and certain things would have made more sense. Whereas if you have never read about any specific demons, such as it didn't make sense, and it just kind of felt lost and befuddled and confusing. Robert Eggers' previous film, The Witch, and in this one, Lighthouse, he does an insane amount of work in pre-production of historical research and getting historical accuracy. So the language in particular in The Lighthouse. So you had Willem Dafoe's character was an old sea captain who had been injured, and that's why he was working at a lighthouse. Whereas Robert Pattinson's character was a lumberjack. So the language they used was very different. Willem Dafoe, everything he said was ye. What are ye eating? No ye. Robert Pattinson always said you. So there was a lot of idioms that Willem Dafoe used that Robert Pattinson wouldn't, and that was interesting. And I'm sure if you were and there's a lot of also just visual allusions to certain mythology, or late 19th century seafaring mythology, that if you were into that, if you were really familiar with lighthouses and lighthouse culture and sea mythology and Greek mythology, there's a lot of things that you're going to pull out of this movie. And if you don't have that information, it just turns into a grind and a bore watching it. So thinking about before I started filming this, what I would liken it to is watching a movie. Say you're watching a Chinese movie, a Jet Li movie or something. And I love Jet Li, and I love watching his old Chinese movies, his movies from Beijing. But try watching that movie without subtitles, where you don't actually know what they're saying, you don't really know what's going on. You can still appreciate the fights and stuff. You can still appreciate some of the things that are happening, but 50 to 75% of the movie is just going over your head. And that doesn't mean that the filmmaker did anything necessarily wrong or that the audience was particularly stupid. It's just they're speaking two different languages. And I think that's what's happening with Robert Eggers' movies. He does so much research into these topics and making them historically accurate, that he in effect is speaking a language different than what the audience is able to speak. And I don't think he's doing a very good job of translating that into something that's accessible to most audiences. So that's kind of how I felt watching it. It felt like watching a foreign language film without subtitles, even though it was in English. Um, so that's kind of an interesting topic. And if you've been paying attention to the last couple of videos I've uploaded, you'll know that I started a podcast with Scott Grissell and Renee Bibby, two frequent collaborators on this show. And this might be something we talk about in the future. At least I'll suggest it. No promises, but just how do you how do you create media when people don't speak the same language? Even when everybody's speaking English, when they're not actually speaking the same dialect or the same visual language. Because really, these are movies that I want to watch, I want to enjoy them, but they're largely over my head, and I'm not to toot my own horn, but I'm not a dumb person. But watching these movies is just like I don't know what you're saying. So, um, like I said, coming out of Lighthouse, I was kind of confused. It was like I liked it, but I was bored, and I don't really know what was what was going on a lot of times. Although I could follow along with what was going on. In a lot of ways, it's kind of probably how Scott felt when he went to go see Infinity War and Endgame, and he's like, what sticks out in my mind is we came out of Infinity War, and he was like, I didn't even realize Captain America was in that movie because, of course, in Infinity War he didn't look like what Captain America normally would. So it's kind of like that. If you're not steeped, when the filmmaker is doing something that the audience is just not steeped in that same kind of knowledge or lore, things can kind of miss the mark. So, Lighthouse, probably a really good movie, probably not a movie accessible for most people. And if you're interested in hearing more in-depth analysis on movies, go check out our podcast, What the What. I know right now it's up on Spotify. We're also putting up audio a week after they debut on podcast platforms. I'll put it up on this channel, Bandwagon Fans, and look for it wherever you get your podcasts. We're just in the process of getting launching on different platforms. But I know we have 3 episodes as of today up on Spotify. So that's it. That's just a quick down and dirty discussion of Lighthouse. If you saw it, let me know what you think. I'm sure some of you are going to have similar feelings that I did, but some of you are probably going to absolutely love it. And if Scott and Renee were sitting here on the side, I know Scott absolutely loved this movie, and Renee was like, I hated that movie so much. And I was just kind of in the middle of that. So leave your comments below. Let me know what you thought of the movie. And as always, like the video. And if you like this content, want to see more of it, subscribe to the channel. And thanks for watching. Get on the bandwagon.